What's going on, guys? It's your boy Lukey here from Grit to Grid. And a couple of months ago, we had the pleasure of interviewing former Formula One driver Vitantonio Liuzzi. If you haven't watched part one, make sure you go and watch part one before you click on this and watch part two. Make sure you get around part one. It was pretty much a story about his whole career, everything in Formula One. This is the part that gets really interesting and really juicy. We're in the deep end of his Formula One career here. He has some fantastic stories about Michael Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel, and a few other drivers as well. And just the different struggles and things he went through in Formula One. And it's definitely worth the listen, guys. Make sure, get around it, have a watch, and please like, subscribe, leave some comments of things that you thought were interesting or things that you'd like to hear in the future. But definitely worth the watch, guys. So stay tuned for this, watch it all, and get around it. Going to this, and I'm excited to talk about this because I reckon this would have been a huge moment for you. 2009 Monza Grand Prix, you get the call up because Fizzy ends up going to Ferrari, and obviously Massa had that bad accident a couple of weeks earlier, and Bourdais wasn't doing well at Ferrari at the time. So getting to debut for Force India at your home Grand Prix, you qualified really strong there as well. I believe you qualified 7th on debut for Force India at Monza. Sutil, I think, was even second at the time. Force India were doing quite well. What were your memories of getting that call up?
Was an amazing comeback, but I was pretty pissed off for qualifying. I mean, in a way, not pissed off, but it was a choice that I think I was not happy about, because at the time you used to qualify with the fuel that was supposed to start for the race. And then I remember pretty well, starting from Friday, I was getting back my rhythm, and going into qualify, I was feeling on fire, and my pace was really, really good. And when we went up to Q3, basically in between Q2 and Q3, you decide how much fuel you put for Q3 and which strategy you're gonna decide for the race. And basically from the pit wall, Mr. Malia tell me that he was happy to send me on the single stop strategy. And I was saying, no, please, Vijay, it's my first race again after 1.5 years. Please let me go for a two stop, basically with lower fuel, trying to do the best qualify. No, Tonio, I believe in you. You go for a single stop. I said, okay. I felt bad to be against him, so I went for a single stop. And it was a shame, basically, because I had a lot of fuel on board. I did an amazing lap, basically P7, but the fuel corrected, I would have been between pole or just ahead of Sutil, that was P2.
Yeah.
So I lost everything basically in Parabolica and Ascari, fuel corrected. So it was a shame because I could have been in the first row. But
It would
these
have
are
been
the
amazing if
it
you
would
did
have
that.
been crazy and amazing. Yes.
So I remember that time when you got the call up for Force India. Was there anything sort of put in place for that 2010 seat, or was it just a race by race at the end of 2009 where see how you go and then we'll look at something for the next year?
No. Basically, I had already a fixed contract straight away after Toro Rosso, so I knew that I was gonna drive for India. That was my contract. It's true as well that contracts in Formula One or in big sports sometimes they don't count, but as it happened in my 2011. But basically, I was sure to race in 2010 because that was my contract signed already. So it was like an earlier preparation of the 2010 season. But it was a shame basically that at that stage the Force India car was only fast for basically the aerodynamic circuit where there is low drag. So it was Spa and Monza. So all the other races were tough races.
Well, I remember that 2009 race so clear at Spa when Fizzy got pole position. Kimi obviously ends up winning that race, but Fizzy was probably faster than him all weekend. It was just Kimi had Kurz, and I don't think Force India had Kurz at that time. And I think like everyone was shocked to see Force India, up the front, because at that stage, they didn't even have a point to their name yet, So to see him go from sort of midfield to actually pole position and then, battling for a win was unbelievable.
But not even Force India was expecting that step. They knew that we had low drag, that it means less downforce, and that's why in the normal circuit we were struggling. But we didn't expect it could have made such a big difference in circuit like Spa and Monza.
Were you, when you got that call up for Monza, for Fizzy going to Ferrari, did you know that you guys would be that competitive there as well, or you weren't even expecting that at Monza?
After Spa, we were believing that we would have been in a good position, let's say a higher position as well,
Yeah.
where the team was usually, but we didn't expect as good as where we ended up. Because even there in Monza at the end, we had possibility to finish on the podium in the race. I blew up the gearbox 15 laps to the end when I was P2 or P3, I don't remember. So we would have
Yeah.
finished for sure on the podium without the gearbox broken, but we for sure was another short podium, but we didn't know that after that the drop down was drastic because the race after
Yeah.
was Singapore and we went back to P17, P16, something like that.
No, I remember that you did retire from that race in Monza, and personally, I was shattered because, like I said, I've been a fan of yours from the Toro Rosso Red Bull days as well. And when you retire, I'm like, oh my god, man, because I'm as an Australian at the time, Mark Webber, I was all about Mark Webber, but I was a big fan of yours, so I was shattered when you retired at that race, especially home Grand Prix. You've made your return to Formula One. It's like, my god, nothing could go right.
Yeah, it was a really big shame, and I think these are the sliding doors that can change your career at the end. Unfortunately, all the time, this time in Montreal as well in 2007, I was in a position for podium. Yeah, my 4 or 5 times where I should have been on the podium didn't happen for mechanical failure or other reason. And these are the sliding doors that after they can change completely drastically your career.
That Montreal race in 2007, that's the one where you were right behind Kubica when he had that accident, weren't you?
Yes, exactly. When
Yeah,
Kubica had the massive crash and
yeah,
he was
yeah.
with BMW, and then basically I was 10 laps to go. I was P3 and the suspension broke. Basically, it broke my suspension because I had a piece of the heat shield of the Kubica car stuck to my suspension.
Oh,
And that's why going over the wall of champions, what is the chicane with the high curbs,
yeah.
the lap after lap, basically the suspension cracked more and more and more until it completely exploded.
Again, because like watching that, I remember you were right behind the accident. You drove over all the debris because it was scattered all over the track, and I was like, oh my God, like it should have taken you out as well. It was so bad.
Yeah. But luckily, I was really shocked. I didn't know what to do because when you see such a big shunt, you think that you want to stop, but you cannot
Yeah.
stop because you have other car behind. But it's not easy situation where I went straight on the radio trying to understand if Robert was okay. It was a really big miracle that he came out of the car without big consequence.
So we'll go on now. 2010, you keep that full-time race seat with Force India. Um, Probably your most consistent season in Formula One in terms of point scoring. Had a pretty consistent year. I believe, I think it was 20 or 30 points in that season as well, which was really strong.
Yeah, it was kind of like nearly 30 points, but it was
Yeah.
a nightmare of a season basically because we started well the first 4 or 5 races. At the time, my teammate was Adrian Sutil, and we had both a pretty good pace. But then it was basically the season where the McLaren made an amazing evolution with the F duct. You remember
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the the system that you had to close a hole was stalling the rear wing, and the car used to go much stronger on the straight. And basically, all the other team developed this system quickly. And after I think race 5 or 6 of the championship, we introduced this as well. But I don't want to. I'm always too nice, as I told you before. I never really blamed the team. I thought always was a coincidence. But basically, the rest of the year was a nightmare for me because since that time we started using the F duct in my car was never working. Every time I was using it, it was never activating. And basically, sometimes like in qualify or in the race, I was like 1.5 seconds slower than Sutil, but only because I was much slower on the straight because of this
Yeah.
F duct not working. And so it was, for whatever reason, I don't want to say that was the team doing it on purpose, because I actually never thought at that time, but because it was really complex system to create, I felt that it was happening always to me that never worked. So it was just like an amazing, incredible coincidence for me at the time, but in my car never worked. And actually, the race that we didn't use because the downforce was much lower and we didn't need to use the F duct, it was Montreal. And in Montreal, I had an amazing speed. I qualified P5 in the race. I had a contact with Massa in the start, and from last, I finished P8 or P10, something like that. So I was super fast.
It's interesting because you look back at Adrian in particular, Sutil, again, use the term paid drivers, but he came in with a lot of financial backing. And at the time, let's be honest, Force India, VJ was heavily funded himself, but, they needed the money where they could get it. So you can see that, there's a lot of coincidences there that they're trying to, make him stand out a bit because they knew he was the one bringing a lot of the money in at the time as well. How was your experiences with BJ, Tonio? What was he like?
It was an amazing character. He was really cool as a person. Nothing to say, but obviously was not experienced in Formula One, so he had basically to give the running of the team to his friend Bob Fenley and to other people. But as a person, I will never forget. Vijay was a really cool person of art, because I went to India a few times, and the people used to pray for him. It was because he was helping people for kids at school, helping family. But in the other side, in Formula One, he didn't have a great reputation because he was not paying on time many times. So it was two sides of the medal, the two faces of the medal. But with me, nothing to say. He has been straight and was a nice person.
No, that's nice to hear. Again, I liked VJ. I thought he was always, like you said, a character of the paddock. It was always good to see him around the paddock and whatnot. See him be out there. He always wore outlandish clothes from time to time, big gold chains and
blinking.
Yeah, oh mate, loved it. And the teeth, he had those pearly white teeth as well, like porcelain. But I wanted to say, so after your time at Force India, you then went across to HRT. Now, that was my favorite livery, and I'll tell you this now. I actually just bought a model HRT that's actually your one from 2011. I used to love that livery on that car, but let's be honest, it was a shocking car to drive. How was that going there?
Was really tough. Obviously, as you said, you knew they all know that they had a really small budget. For me at the time, it was like a transition situation because I was negotiating with Renault for 2012, but at the end it didn't work. So I ended up in HRT because basically Dr. Colles, he was a big fan of mine, and he was the person that brought me also to Force India in 2000, end of 2007. So he had big respect for me, and basically thought that I was the right person to make the team growing up. So, but we knew that the first year it would have been really, really tough because the car was really not only slow, but it was really low grip. It was really difficult to drive, and was an intense season. There were some plans for developing, but after the owners changed, there was a lot of internal chaos, and basically the team went to an end when the year after it got bought in 2012 from the Spanish, another Spanish group that had a funds behind, but they had not a clue about motorsport, and in 1 year they destroyed it.
Because I actually remember, I think Pedro Della Rosa went there in 2012 in the last year, and I think the rumor was he was going to end up being the team manager, or he was going to be a driver and then go on to manage the team, but the funding just wasn't there. I've heard him say in the past as well, it was just once they were there, they could see that they just weren't putting money into it, and it just was really no development of the car as well. But you just said something that was interesting. So after your time at Force India in 2010, were there other opportunities with other teams? Because did you just say Renault, there was a potential opportunity to go to Renault at the time?
Yeah, at the time there was Eric Bouillet running the team of Renault, and there was in talk for already since a while with them. But in that year when I was supposed to enter, let's say, the program, at the end they choose Grosjean always because he had budget with him, and I never had any single penny supporting me in terms of sponsorship. So was the reason why I left Force India because of the Resta coming with budget from not sponsor, but he came with a big support from Mercedes on the gearbox, on the powertrain. So it was a huge discount for Force India, and that's why they put him instead of me. And during the time I was negotiating with Renault, but it didn't work because of Total supporting. The sponsor Total was supporting Grosjean, but as I say, this is the sliding doors in life. It is what it is. That's how it is Formula One.
So going to HRT again, you were the first ever Formula One teammate of Daniel Ricciardo. You know, do you remember much of him coming in? And look, just speaking to you here, you're such an open character. I'm sure you would have been a good support to him. How was he with you at that time? Because he was funded by Red Bull as well at HRT, I believe.
But that was the reason why basically he entered HRT because Dr. Marco knew about my speed because in the paddock I always had a big reputation for being one of the fastest in the field. So Dr. Marco decided to push Daniel into the team into HRT to put beside me, like to have a benchmark. And actually I was a big supporter of Daniel because he showed straight away the speed. He showed in other category that he was fast and he's a nice guy. So he's a good fun as a teammate. So I was a fan of him. Nothing, let's say, no, there was no jealousy or was like a real pure relationship. And I'm happy for him that he achieved what he achieved.
After that sort of season of the HRT in 2011, were there any doors for you to stay in Formula One, or did you know at that stage? Like, I'm assuming you would have been mentally very deflated as well because you've gone from being in a point scoring team to a team that's struggling to even qualify at times. Mentally, how was that on you? And did you still have that passion to stay in Formula One, or were you just wanting to get out by that stage?
It's mixed feelings when you have such a period where basically nothing is going right for you. You know that you are always super fast. You know that you are basically believed as one of the fastest in the field. But then at the end, you see, it was a period where all the team were struggling with money. I was discussing with Lotus Caterham as well, with Tony Fernandez. But at the end, basically, they had to go for money of another driver. I don't remember who was it. I think Petrov, or at the end, you realize that at that period was not all about the money, but a lot about the money. So it didn't work for me. It was really upsetting. And when I came out, I stepped out of the field of Formula One was quite depressing. It was really tough mentally because you knew that you should have achieved a lot more, but it didn't work for many different reasons that are not in your hands. But it is only a shame, but as I said before, is the way it is.
Look, again, you know, I don't want to harp on this, but mate, you know, you definitely deserved to make it in Formula One. You deserved to stay longer in Formula One, but you've even done a lot of things in Formula One that drivers can't say they've done. So to even make it to Formula One, score points, you should be proud of your accomplishments, regardless of you know what you were able or how long you were able to stay in the system for. But at the end of the day, to even get a drive is a task in itself. It's such a hard sport to break into, especially on raw speed. You know, so to do that, mate, you should be proud of yourself for that by all means. But I want to keep going as well because after HRT, you actually came down under and did some V8 supercar racing. How is that for you going from open wheel racing to then going into a V8 supercar that's closed off?
Was an amazing weekend. I really enjoyed the experience in the Gold Coast 500. And actually, when I was called to come, either though it was a completely different car to drive, because it was my first experience into a car with a roof. And at the time, the V8 supercar were also different, pretty different from normal GT cars because they were jumping, moving a lot. So it was pretty weird, a lot of power and the level was really, really high. When you come here and you compete with the driver, the Australian driver that are racing here full season since really long time, they know the circuit, they know the cars. Is really difficult to compete and be faster as them. But it was an amazing weekend. I will always be thankful to Donny D'Alberto that supported me and called me for this experience. It was a shame that we could have achieved even there some good results, but because we were time to time pretty fast, but not for the podium. We were not for the podium, but we could have finished in top 10, and was already a good achievement because the team was not one of the toughest team.
Again, I remember just sitting back watching that V8 supercar race, and I was stunned when I heard your name that advertised. I was so excited. Like, I'm in Melbourne personally, so I wasn't at the race myself, but I was so excited to have you down in the V8s. And I think there has been a couple of other Formula One drivers that have come down and done some V8 supercar racing as well. Mika Salo, I think, did it once or twice. And I don't want to be quoted on the others.
I think Morbidelli, friends, and there were a few that they came and do
Christian
it.
might have as well. I feel like Christian might have done it.
Clean did
Yeah.
Clean did it as well, yes, because we met there too.
Yeah. So I want to keep going from that because then you did something that I'm really curious about what your thoughts are. You went to Formula E and had a few races in Formula E. How was that experience for you in terms of the car and the way it responded, but also the whole concept of Formula E? Are you a fan of it? Are you not a fan? Where do you sit with all of that?
I was not a fan of the electric world, let's say. The electric car that didn't really impress me, but I knew that Alejandro Agag was going for this championship, and I supported him straight away because I knew how strong he was and how motivated he was for this. And I was always one of the promoter of the championship even before, even though I was not a big fan of the electric engines. Then I ended up racing with my ex colleague Jarno Trulli's team,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
unfortunately, it was a bit of a nightmare because he really was struggling with the car. The engine with the car was really difficult. We scored some good results, but was not an enjoyable time because the car were pretty weird. Especially, I was in the in the first generation in the
Yeah.
second year, and they were completely different from this one we can see now that are much faster.
Have you been in a Formula E car in recent times at all, or you haven't? Because they look like they've developed quite a lot since those first few seasons.
Massively, they developed the car. Already, in my time, we used to have the pit stop and changing from car to car. We used to jump out of one car and jump in another one. Now you don't need to do that. The racing is totally different. But what I appreciated, I think, Agag made an amazing business because he created a big vibe around it. The cars are nice, but not so special, let's say, to basically watching them races, but the level of driver, the competition, the level of team involving and manufacturers is just insane. And the vibe beside the Formula E world is incredible, and they deserved it what they achieved because Alejandro made an amazing project.
It's really good to hear that. And look, I'm like you personally. I love the petrol. I love the sounds of the raw engines. I still miss the V8, V10 era of Formula One. I think for me personally, that was the best spectacle of Formula One. I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on the current product of Formula One now? Like, are you in touch with it? I know you still watch a lot of races. I follow you on all your social media and stuff, but what is your thoughts on the current product and how do you think it's progressing?
I think as is always Formula One will always be the pinnacle of motorsport. The cars are incredible and they are art piece. I think now they are really the design, the development, the aerodynamic. The aerodynamic is really insane. And I used to love, especially for myself, what I felt that was the maximum level of design was 2 years ago, basically before the drastic change to the new style of cars that they look really futuristic. But in terms of sound, I agree with you. Is my time was the best ever. basically the V10, V8, the sound, the feeling that you have when the Formula One pass in front of you was completely incredible. Now they are definitely really technologically developed because the engine is impossible to understand it basically for a normal person. Last time I was in Abu Dhabi and I went to look at one of the team's engine, and basically between all the power unit, the engine, the hers, the curves, the turbo is really incredible. A lot of tubes and cables is really something that you struggle to understand if you are not an engineer regarding the engine side. And I used to love the engineering side, but in my time was more low profile, let's say, even aerodynamics. Because now when you look at the badge boards, the diffuser, the rear wing of a Formula One is a really art piece.
Yeah, it's a real technical aspect of racing now. Like, again, I love watching a lot of those old races, especially, again, your era in particular, that sort of 2002 to 2010 sort of time frame. I really love that era of Formula One, but the cars were really simple. They were a lot smaller as well, which I think nowadays they like saying that they want to help overtaking, but they've got cars that are nearly taking up half the track now. So
yeah,
it's really strange how they do that. Like, they're talking about they want to increase overtaking, but yet you're making a car even bigger. So there's definitely a few things that I think that they could change. If you could control it, would you go back to the older engines? Like, would you go back, or are you happy with the way the engines are now?
I would go back to the older engine, but just because I enjoy more the sound, I get more adrenaline out of it. Now it's amazing because I think the Formula One will never change, obviously, because it has to develop the automotive world, has to follow the automotive world, and that's why the Formula One went in that direction. Is an insane development, is a huge effort for all the engine manufacturer to develop these new engines, but I still prefer the old school ones. Would be nice to see with the aerodynamic of now, with the style of now, the engine, the V8 or the V10 of the past, how they will fit in it. But I'm happy to. The Formula One now is still amazing. It's just a passionate side that brings you to the old school cars.
Yeah. Well, look, we're going to be wrapping this up shortly, Tony. I've got a couple of quick questions I want to touch on just before I let you go. The first thing I want to ask you about, like, in your career, did you have any sort of setbacks or life events that changed how you approached the sport? Was there anything in particular drastic, or something just even influential in your life that, changed how you approached Formula One?
Not really. I was always really motivated, really sure of myself. I have to say that I think I was always really strong in my mind, but and I always went to my direction, and I think you could see from the way I used to be, in terms of style, mentality, and I never ended up into politics because it was not my side. For sure, I was one of the lucky ones because I also ended up to have an amazing, a good career. Even though physically I was not one of the best, because I struggled for physical injuries that I had when I was a kid. So I was not the best shape ever, even though I was super lucky and I never felt fatigue, or I was never undertrained. Actually, I was always one of the fittest one in the field. But no, in terms of things happening that changed my mentality, no. I was always really focused and decided and committed since I was 10 years old in go-kart.
Oh, perfect. That's good to hear as well. Another thing I wanted to ask is biggest influences of your career. You said your dad sort of helped you get started. I'm assuming he was a big influence. Anyone else, in particular that were big influences on your career going, into motorsport?
Obviously, as I said before, my father was a big supporter. I was lucky that he let me do everything I wanted in terms of decision and how to go forward. It was not deciding for me, teams or where to go, what to do, how to handle the situation. It was always believing in me and letting me do a lot of things. So I will be always thankful to my father that supported me fully in this. But who changed basically my mind to make basically the step between go-karts and formula cars. That was not into my idea at the beginning. I only wanted to win a go-kart world championship. I didn't know that I was on the right direction to Formula One, but it was my ex-manager Peter Collins that basically he convinced me to try and step up into single seater, because at the beginning I was super happy with my career in go-kart.
Oh, it's cool to hear as well. I wanted to ask you as well, because you said you had a few injuries. Was safety and sort of the concern, because again, motorsport, such a dangerous sport, you can have obviously massive accidents. We touched on Kubica's one in Canada in 2007, but did that thought ever cross your mind as well while you were racing, the sort of risks of safety and the dangers of the sport? Was that ever something to play on your mind, or did you always just keep it brushed to the side?
I think I was always one of the wildest one, and I never thought about the dangerous side of motorsport. Especially I was growing up with Red Bull, and they used to let me do all the crazy things. I'm like a pastrana, if you know the American guy, the crazy guy inside the body of an Italian, because I wanted to do all the crazy things like him. And basically, my target was to jump out of an airplane without parachute, like he did it for
Oh,
Red Bull. But
yeah.
my wife, she stopped me to do that. So that's why I live of adrenaline, and I have no fear of anything when I do my sport and motorsport. I think when you drive cars or motorcycle, you cannot have fear, because if not, you cannot perform. You have to be always over the limit and drive 110%. With fear, you cannot do this. So it's not something that is related to our life. But you're always, from our side, sure that FIA is doing a lot of work to develop the cars. And I have to say that the cars are really, really safe. It's
Yeah.
really, really rare that happens something, but, coincidence can happen, but Formula One is doing an amazing job to develop these Caterpillar's car that can be like saving life in any kind of situation.
Well, they definitely have obviously improved their safety drastically. You look at, Grosjean's big accident in 2020. Even Mick Schumacher had a big one at Monaco where the car split in half, but that was safety reasons that they've now done that. Like, so they've come such a long way. The Halo obviously wasn't around when you were driving, but it's become such a safe sport, which is really good, because you look at the racing from the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, deaths were definitely more frequent than now. You just wouldn't hear of it in Formula One, which is obviously such a positive. Unfortunately, Jules Bianchi, which was again just a freak accident at the time, but now with the Halo, that they've brought that in to stop stuff like that. I just also wanted to touch on, Tonio, with your Formula One career. I want to know your best mates that you made out of there. So, what drivers did you become closest with? Who would you call your top three mates in Formula One?
But definitely, Christian Klien is like my brother. Even though we had this situation where we had to share seats, so we were fighting always for the same seats. But he's one of my best friends. Then Fisichella is definitely one of my best mates. Scott Speed, Barrichello. As you saw me in my past, I never had any discussion or difficulties with anybody. I was always like friend of everybody in the
Yeah,
track, and I was always organizing things with all together, because I always felt that when you drive, you don't have friends. You close the visor and everybody's an enemy, a competitor. But when you are out of the car and you are out of the track, I don't see why you cannot be friends or going out for dinner, spending some time together. So I was always the guy that was putting people together.
uh,
I used to be a good friend of Juan Pablo. I used to be a
yeah.
great friend with Michael Schumacher. Barrichello, Felipe. I don't have enemies in the paddock.
Three more to go. We're nearly there. I want to know as well. any of your favorite Michael Schumacher stories that you've had? Because you said you know he had a great respect for you. Any good Schumacher stories that maybe people don't know about?
I don't know if they know about it, but if you remember in 2010, when I crashed with Michael when he was with Mercedes, we crashed together in
Abu
Abu
Dhabi?
Dhabi.
Yeah,
Exactly, when basically he spun because he had the contact with Rosberg, and basically I was blind because I had cars in front of me, and then I ran over him.
yeah,
Basically, when I jumped out of the car and I went, Michael, okay, you're fine. And he laughed at me and they say, yeah, of course, but when are we going to skydiving? And I said, Michael, we were still in the middle of the track, we were just removing the helmets, and he was already thinking, he realized it was something, it was not his fault, it was not my fault, and it just
yeah,
happened. We couldn't do much. And he starts already talking about other adrenalinic stuff, because he used to be like me and living of adrenaline.
yeah,
And
yeah.
straight away in the middle of the track, we were still with the balaclava in our head. He said to me, okay, Wednesday, are we going to skydiving? Are you free? And I said, okay, Michael, let's see, we'll talk later on, but how are you? Blah, blah. So
That's
things like that.
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's
It
crazy.
shows, it shows, like you said earlier, like he'd won the world championships. He's done so much in the sport. At that stage, it was all for fun for him. He was just enjoying his time back in the sport. Like he was just having fun. I want to ask this one. I'm really curious about this. Italians in Formula One. There hasn't been in recent time much success. What do you think that is?
In Italy, we have a big problem of basically of economy. Is first of all, because the economy is a really important side of this in of Formula One, or let's say of motorsport. Already go kart is costing a fortune now in early stage when you're 10, 11, and 12 years old. Plus, might sound weird, but Ferrari is not a big support for Italians that are growing into motorsport, because obviously they take all the image in Italy away from us, and you always me, Trulli, Fisichella, trying to get a career, we had always to move away from Italy. I grew up in Germany, Trulli in UK, Fisichella as well in Germany. We had to do our career in other countries, because obviously in Italy we are hidden from the huge and is right name of Ferrari, that is the number one brand in the world. And they don't want Italian drivers, and it's clear, everybody knows that they are not going to get an Italian driver for whatever reason. I guess is a political side of the medal, but
It's crazy though,
they do
isn't
other
it?
one.
It's crazy because you look at the support, especially at Monza and Imola, the crowd support for Formula One is huge. And it's just, it's just crazy to think that they're not trying to breed many Formula One drivers. There's no support there. It blows my mind that it's not a priority for them, essentially.
No, but it's not only a priority, it's like a rule, because they never really, part of the 5 races, they gave it as a present to Fisichella.
I remember, yep, yep.
In 2000 and what was it, 9, 10. And
Fine.
basically, we all know in the pilot that they are not going for Italian. Marchione was the only one that was trying to change that, but he didn't live long enough to modify this point of view. Let's say, at the end of the day, the team is their one. They do what they want with the team, and nothing against. It's just a reality. But if you look at Alpine is taking French driver, Renault, I mean. Mercedes used to take German drivers. McLaren used to take British drivers. So
Yeah, yeah.
in Italy works the other way, but they don't take. They
Yeah,
don't want to take it
it is crazy
because
about that. The final question I've got, Tony, you've been an absolute gentleman, and I can't thank you enough for this. But the final question I've got for you: predictions for the 2023 Formula One season. What are your predictions for this season?
I think that we're gonna have an amazing championship. I think that Mercedes was growing up really well at the end of the season, and I think that Vasseur is a great person for Ferrari, trying to optimize the performance of Ferrari. So Red Bull, I don't believe that they can go so much higher than what they already have been last year, because they already stepped with an amazing car in 2022. So I think we will have a much better level. Let's say we might have 3 teams fighting for the championship, and I hope that, because I think we're gonna. I hope that for the spectators. I don't hope it for me, because I'm always a steward of Formula One races, so I always have to be in between the fights of all the drivers and deciding who is guilty, who is not, and it's not easy because they always want to be right. But I think we're gonna have a really nice and interesting championship.
Yeah, look, like you, I really hope we do because, with all that happened at the final race of 2021, I think it left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths in the way it ended. And especially last year, it was a pretty lackluster season for the second half of the season. Verstappen had it wrapped up pretty early on. So I think it's good for the sport when it's a tight championship. 2010 was the last time it was a really. Remember in that year, I think Mark Webber, Alonso, Vettel, Hamilton, all were fighting for the title. So it'd be good for the sport to have a really close battle this year. But mate, I would just want to say again, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure finally getting to meet you and having this discussion. I hope you come down to Melbourne. Do you know if you'll be coming down to the Australian Grand Prix, or you're not too sure?
Not this year, not this year. I really hope to come back next year because I really miss Australia. I used to love there. I used to love the Grand Prix of Melbourne, the city, the people, and Australia. For me, I felt like a second family because they've been always really nice to me, and I really enjoy there. If it was not so far from Europe, I would have come there definitely really often because it was one of my favorite places around the world. So I hope next year maybe I see with FIA if I'm gonna be one of the stewards for Melbourne race.
Make sure you are, because like I said to you earlier, in a private message, but come down. Me and my partner are taking you out for dinner. We're going to show you around and treat you, mate. But thank you again for your time, Tonio. You've got a beautiful partner and a daughter as well. How's your daughter going and your partner?
She's great. They're fine. They're fine. I love this life, and they're amazing. They fulfill all the other side out of motorsport.
That's awesome, mate. Well, again, Tonio, thank you so much. I'll be in touch with you again, mate, and definitely stay in touch. And like I said, come down to Australia. You've got a place here with me for sure. We'll want to take you out and show you around. Thank you again very much, Tonio, okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You take care of yourself.
See you soon.
See you, mate.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao. Thanks for watching that awesome interview, guys. I hope you liked it. Like I said, Vitantonio is such an amazing person, and looking forward to him coming down to Australia, hopefully for the next year's Melbourne Grand Prix. Please, guys, we've got some awesome content coming on this channel soon as well. We also did an interview with Mika Salo, former Formula One driver Mika Salo, raced for Ferrari, Toyota, Arrows, a few other teams as well. So definitely get around that one. That will be coming out shortly as well. So hopefully, guys, stick around with us. Like, subscribe, get around it, help build this up. We've got a lot of awesome things coming your way. Thank you.